2025 Cambodia-Thailand Border Conflict Report. Overview. The 2025 Cambodia-Thailand border conflict represents a significant and escalating humanitarian and military crisis rooted in a long-standing territorial dispute between the two nations. The conflict, which saw notable escalations in July 2025, primarily revolves around competing claims over several non-demarcated areas along their shared 800-kilometer border, particularly focused on ancient Hindu temples like Prasat Tamun Tam and Preah Vihear. Historical context. The tensions between Cambodia and Thailand regarding their border have a complex history exacerbated by nationalistic sentiments and historical grievances. The Preah Vihear Temple, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, has been a flashpoint for violence, most notably in 2011 when clashes resulted in multiple casualties. Despite previous international rulings in favor of Cambodia concerning the temple's jurisdiction, unresolved issues over demarcation and military presence have kept tensions simmering. Timeline of events. May 2025. Tensions began to rise dramatically when a Cambodian soldier was killed in an exchange of fire with Thai troops at a disputed border area, prompting both nations to bolster their military presence along the frontier. July 16 and 23, 2025, two incidents involving landmines injured several Thai soldiers, further inflaming the situation. These incidents were cited by Thailand as evidence of Cambodian aggression. July 24, 2025, clashes erupted, characterized by intense gunfire, shelling, and airstrikes. Thailand reported casualties, including a soldier and 14 civilians, while Cambodia reported at least one death and several injuries. The violence forced over 130,000 people to evacuate from conflict areas in Thailand. July 25, 2025, in response to the escalating violence, the UN Security Council convened an urgent meeting at Cambodia's request, marking the first such discussion in over a decade. Both nations accused each other of instigating hostilities, complicating diplomatic efforts. July 26, 2025, reports emerged indicating that the death toll had risen to 32, with many more injured. The humanitarian crisis deepened as thousands sought refuge in Thailand. Key points of commonality among sources. 1. Severe escalation of violence. All reports agree that the conflict represents the most serious escalation in over 10 years, with significant military engagements and civilian casualties. 2. Historical tensions. The historical context of the territorial dispute is consistently acknowledged, particularly the significance of the temples and the previous violent confrontations, notably in 2011. 3. International concerns. There is a unified call from international entities, including the UN and ASEAN, for restraint and dialogue, emphasizing the need for a peaceful resolution. Differences among sources. Casualty figures. Reports vary regarding casualty figures, reflecting the rapidly changing nature of the conflict. While some sources reported 16 deaths early in the conflict, others indicated the toll rose to 32 by the following day. Military actions. The specifics of military actions differ slightly across reports, with some emphasizing airstrikes conducted by Thailand and others focusing on ground engagements. Diplomatic responses. Cambodia has sought international mediation, while Thailand has typically favored bilateral negotiations, a nuance highlighted differently across reports. International response. The international community expressed deep concern regarding the outbreak of violence. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres called for maximum restraint and dialogue, urging both nations to address their issues in a spirit of cooperation. Malaysia, chair of ASEAN, proposed a ceasefire, which Cambodia accepted, but Thailand's response fluctuated, highlighting its preference for bilateral discussions without external mediation. Conclusion. The 2025 Cambodia-Thailand border conflict has escalated into a humanitarian crisis with deep historical roots in territorial disputes. While international calls for de-escalation and dialogue have emerged, entrenched positions from both countries complicate the prospects for a peaceful resolution. As the situation continues to evolve, ongoing developments will likely impact regional stability and diplomatic relations in Southeast Asia. The urgency for a diplomatic resolution has never been more critical as the humanitarian implications of the conflict continue to grow. Counterintuitive information in the 2025 Cambodia-Thailand border conflict. 1. Escalation from a minor incident. While the conflict escalated significantly in July 2025, it stemmed from what appeared to be a relatively minor incident, the killing of a Cambodian soldier in May during a sporadic exchange of fire. This minor skirmish set off a chain reaction of violence, which is counterintuitive as such incidents often do not result in widespread military conflict, particularly between two nations with a history of diplomatic relations. 2. Civilian displacement versus military casualties. The reported civilian evacuation of over 130,000 people in Thailand due to the conflict raises questions about the nature of the conflict itself. Despite significant military engagement and reported casualties on both sides, the humanitarian impact on civilians was disproportionately high, suggesting that military actions were occurring in densely populated areas. This is counterintuitive because one might expect military engagements to primarily affect combatants, not result in mass civilian displacement. 3. International mediation preference. Cambodia's push for international mediation through the UN, contrasting with Thailand's preference for bilateral negotiations, highlights a shift in strategy that is counterintuitive. Typically, nations involved in border disputes may prefer to handle such matters independently to maintain sovereignty. Cambodia's request for UN involvement suggests a strategic move to internationalize the conflict and gain external pressure on Thailand, which is not the usual approach in territorial disputes. For rapidly changing casualty figures, the differing reports on casualty figures, with one source indicating 16 deaths early in the conflict and another reporting 32 the following day, reflect the chaotic and rapidly evolving nature of conflict situations. Such discrepancies are common in war but are often assumed to stabilize over time as accurate information is gathered. The continued divergence in reports suggests either a lack of control over information by both governments or an inability to contain the conflict, which is an unusual scenario in modern warfare where information is typically more tightly controlled. 5. Historical context versus immediate triggers. The historical context of the territorial dispute, particularly regarding ancient temples, is often seen as the primary driver of such conflicts. However, the immediate triggers of violence in 2025, including landmine incidents and military provocations, highlight how contemporary factors can suddenly escalate tensions rooted in historical grievances. This juxtaposition of historical context with immediate causes is counterintuitive, as one might expect that historical disputes would lead to more calculated and less impulsive military engagements. 6. Cambodia's diplomatic maneuvering. Cambodia's readiness to accept a ceasefire proposal from Malaysia while simultaneously bringing the issue to the UN is an interesting diplomatic maneuver. This strategy of engaging multiple platforms for resolution, international and regional, contrasts with the expected behavior of nations in conflict, which often leads to a rigid stance focused on national pride and sovereignty. The willingness to consider external mediation can imply a recognition of vulnerability, which is often not openly acknowledged in diplomatic conflicts. 7. Revisiting International Court of Justice (ICJ) jurisdiction. Cambodia's repeated requests for the ICJ to adjudicate the border dispute contrast with Thailand's consistent refusal to recognize the court's jurisdiction. This dynamic is counterintuitive, as one would expect a nation that has received favorable rulings from the ICJ in the past to leverage those legal victories more aggressively. Instead, Thailand's refusal suggests an underlying strategic calculation that prioritizes bilateral negotiations over potential legal outcomes that could be unfavorable in the future. 8. Allegations of premeditation. Both nations accused each other of premeditated attacks, which is a common claim in border disputes. However, the counterintuitive aspect lies in the fact that Cambodia accused Thailand of indiscriminate attacks, while Thailand claimed that Cambodian forces initiated the hostilities. This mutual blame highlights a possible misalignment between the realities on the ground and the narratives constructed by both governments, suggesting that both sides may be engaging in disinformation or strategic exaggeration to justify military actions. 9. Call for restraint amidst escalation. Despite the severe escalation of violence, international calls for restraint have been met with little immediate effect. This situation is counterintuitive because one would expect that international pressure, especially from powerful entities like the UN and ASEAN, would lead to some form of de-escalation or negotiation. The continued violence despite these calls indicates a breakdown in the efficacy of traditional diplomatic mechanisms in crisis situations. 10. Long-term consequences of immediate conflict. The immediate conflict may lead to long-term changes in regional alliances and security dynamics in Southeast Asia. While such conflicts typically reinforce existing tensions, the potential for shifts in diplomatic relationships, particularly with ASEAN's involvement in Malaysia's mediation efforts, suggests a counterintuitive outcome, that a violent conflict could paradoxically lead to stronger regional cooperation in the long run as nations reassess their security strategies in light of the instability. These points illustrate how the 2025 Cambodia-Thailand border conflict encapsulates several counterintuitive dynamics that challenge conventional understandings of national conflict diplomacy and international relations. The 2025 Cambodia-Thailand border conflict has escalated into a significant humanitarian crisis. Yet certain key aspects of the situation are frequently overlooked despite their potential long-term implications. Here are several critical points that deserve attention. 1. Historical context and its impact on current relations. The historical animosities over territorial disputes, particularly regarding the ancient Hindu temples such as Prasat Tamun Tam and Preah Vihear, are often summarized but not deeply analyzed in mainstream narratives. Many reports highlight the incidents without contextualizing why these sites matter so much to both nations. The Preah Vihear temple, for instance, is not just a relic, it symbolizes national identity and pride for both Cambodia and Thailand. Significance. Understanding the historical significance of these sites can shed light on the motivations behind the current hostilities. The temples serve as potent symbols that can inflame nationalistic sentiments, making diplomatic resolutions more challenging. Acknowledging this historical context can lead to more effective conflict resolution strategies that address not just the territorial aspects but also the emotional and cultural stakes involved. 2. Casualty reporting discrepancies. Different sources report varying casualty figures, which may seem like a minor detail, but it highlights the chaotic nature of conflicts and the challenges of reliable information in war zones. For instance, the reported death toll escalated from 16 to 32 within a day, indicating the rapid development of the situation and the potential for misinformation. Significance. Discrepancies in casualty figures can influence international responses and perceptions. If one side believes its casualties are significantly higher, it may harden its stance and escalate military responses. This is crucial in shaping diplomatic negotiations and international interventions, as differing narratives can lead to misunderstandings and prolonged conflict. 3. International response and the role of ASEAN. While the international community, including the UN and ASEAN, has called for restraint, the effectiveness of these interventions is often questioned. Malaysia's proposal for a ceasefire illustrates an attempt at mediation, but Thailand's fluctuating stance on accepting third-party involvement raises concerns about the efficacy of ASEAN as a stabilizing force. Significance. The role of regional organizations like ASEAN in conflict resolution is often underestimated. The dynamics within ASEAN, especially when member states have differing preferences for mediation, bilateral versus multilateral, can complicate peace processes. Investigating how ASEAN can strengthen its role in future conflicts could provide insights into enhancing regional stability and cooperation. 4. Humanitarian impact and displacement. The conflict has resulted in the evacuation of over 130,000 individuals. A fact that is frequently noted but often glossed over in terms of its long-term implications. The humanitarian crisis extends beyond immediate casualties. It encompasses the psychological and socio-economic impacts on displaced populations. Significance: displacement can lead to a range of issues including loss of livelihoods, trauma, and long-term health problems. Understanding these consequences is critical for planning humanitarian assistance and recovery efforts. Additionally, the international community may need to focus not only on immediate relief but also on long-term rehabilitation and integration strategies for those affected. 5. Media and narrative framing. The framing of the conflict in media reports often emphasizes violence and military actions without delving into the underlying causes or potential pathways for peace. This can lead to a one-dimensional understanding of the conflict, which does not reflect the complexities involved. Significance: the way conflicts are reported can shape public opinion and influence policymakers. A more nuanced narrative that includes calls for dialogue, historical context, and the voices of affected civilians could foster a greater understanding of the conflict and encourage more constructive approaches to resolution. 6. Diplomatic strategies and future prospects. The contrasting diplomatic approaches of Cambodia and Thailand, Cambodia seeking international mediation while Thailand prefers bilateral talks, highlight a fundamental divide in how the two nations perceive their relationship and the conflict. This difference is often understated but is crucial for understanding the complexities of negotiations. Significance: future peace negotiations may hinge on finding common ground between these diplomatic preferences. A failure to reconcile these approaches could lead to stalemates in discussions and prolong the conflict. Exploring hybrid diplomatic solutions that incorporate both bilateral and multilateral elements may provide a path forward. Conclusion: while the 2025 Cambodia-Thailand border conflict has drawn international attention, many of its significant and complex dimensions are often overlooked. Understanding the historical, humanitarian, diplomatic, and media-related aspects of the conflict can illuminate the broader implications for regional stability and peace. Addressing these dimensions is essential for fostering a lasting resolution to the conflict and preventing future escalations. 1. Escalation of violence and humanitarian impact. The 2025 Cambodia-Thailand border conflict marks a significant escalation in violence, with casualty figures rising rapidly and over 130,000 individuals displaced from their homes. This humanitarian crisis underscores the urgent need for international intervention and dialogue to address the conflict. The severity of the situation has prompted responses from the UN Security Council, highlighting the international community's concern over the potential for further escalation and the impact on regional stability. 2. Historical context and territorial disputes. The conflict is deeply rooted in a long-standing territorial dispute, particularly over ancient Hindu temples like Prasat Tamun Tam and Preah Vihear. Previous clashes in 2011 have set a precedent for violence, and the historical context is crucial for understanding the motivations and tensions driving the current conflict. Recognizing the historical grievances is essential for any potential resolution, as it informs the national narratives of both Cambodia and Thailand. 3. Differing diplomatic approaches. The divergent diplomatic stances of Cambodia and Thailand significantly complicate conflict resolution efforts. Cambodia is advocating for international mediation, including involvement from the UN and the International Court of Justice (ICJ), while Thailand prefers bilateral negotiations. This fundamental difference in approach reflects broader geopolitical dynamics and influences the effectiveness of proposed ceasefire initiatives, such as Malaysia's efforts to mediate between the two nations. 4. International and regional responses. The international response to the conflict has been marked by calls for restraint and dialogue from various actors, including the UN and ASEAN. The urgency of the situation has led to an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council, signaling the gravity of the conflict on a global stage. Regional players, particularly Malaysia, have attempted to facilitate dialogue, but the fluctuating positions of the involved countries highlight the challenges of achieving a lasting ceasefire and resolution. The international community's involvement remains critical in navigating this complex landscape and addressing the underlying issues fueling the conflict. 1. The India-Pakistan Wars 1947, 1948, 1965, 1971. The territorial disputes between India and Pakistan, particularly over the Kashmir region, have led to several military conflicts. The first war began in 1947, shortly after the partition of British India, with both nations claiming Kashmir. This resulted in a UN-mediated ceasefire and the establishment of the line of control. The 1965 war saw further escalation, with both nations engaging in full-scale military operations. The 1971 conflict initially centered around the independence movement in East Pakistan, now Bangladesh, also included elements of the Kashmir dispute, leading to significant territorial changes and humanitarian crises. 2. The Sino-Indian War in 1962. The border conflict between China and India primarily arose from territorial disputes in the Himalayan region, notably over Aksai Chin and Arunachal Pradesh. The war broke out in October 1962 after years of diplomatic tensions and failed negotiations. China launched a decisive military campaign, resulting in significant territorial gains for China and a humiliating defeat for India. The conflict has had lasting implications for Sino-Indian relations and continues to influence border dynamics in the region. 3. The Eritrean-Ethiopian War in 1998-2000. This conflict arose from a border dispute between Eritrea and Ethiopia, primarily over the town of Badme. Despite both nations having been allies during their struggle for independence from Ethiopia, tensions escalated into a full-scale war in 1998. The conflict resulted in tens of thousands of deaths and a significant humanitarian crisis. A peace agreement was reached in 2000. But border tensions persisted for years until a final peace agreement was signed in 2018, marking a significant shift in relations between the two nations. Future outlook: predictions for the 2025 Cambodia-Thailand border conflict. As the Cambodia-Thailand border conflict escalates, several predictions can be made regarding its future trajectory and potential impacts on the region. Understanding the complexities of this situation will help in anticipating both immediate and long-term outcomes. 1. Continued military engagement. In the short term, it is likely that military engagements will persist as both nations bolster their military presence along the border. The historical context suggests that skirmishes may continue, particularly in contested areas. The unwillingness of either side to back down, coupled with nationalist sentiments, could lead to further clashes. 2. Humanitarian crisis expansion. The ongoing violence will exacerbate the humanitarian crisis, with increasing numbers of displaced individuals seeking refuge in Thailand. As of late July 2025, over 130,000 people have already been evacuated. If the conflict continues, this number could rise significantly, leading to a strain on resources and services in both countries. International humanitarian organizations may be required to intervene, providing aid and support to those affected. 3. International mediation and involvement. The call for international mediation will likely grow louder as the conflict escalates. While Cambodia has sought UN involvement, Thailand's preference for bilateral negotiations may lead to a stalemate. However, ASEAN under Malaysian leadership may play a crucial role in mediating discussions. As regional stability is threatened, external powers such as the United States and China could engage more deeply, potentially influencing the negotiation processes. 4. Increased diplomatic pressure. As the conflict escalates, diplomatic pressure from the international community is expected to rise. Countries with interests in Southeast Asia will likely urge both nations to de-escalate tensions. The UN Security Council may hold more frequent meetings to monitor the situation, and resolutions could be proposed to impose sanctions or other measures if hostilities continue unchecked. 5. Potential for a ceasefire agreement. Despite the current hostilities, there is a chance that a ceasefire agreement will be reached, particularly if ASEAN mediators can facilitate dialogue. Malaysia's proposal for a ceasefire has already been accepted by Cambodia, indicating a potential pathway for reducing violence. However, Thailand's fluctuating position may hinder such efforts, necessitating ongoing negotiations. 6. Long-term territorial negotiations. In the long term, there may be a renewed push for formal negotiations regarding territorial disputes. The International Court of Justice (ICJ) could be approached again to adjudicate specific claims, especially if both nations seek to stabilize the region post-conflict. Historical rulings such as the 2013 decision favoring Cambodia regarding the Preah Vihear temple could influence these negotiations. 7. Implications for regional stability. The conflict has broader implications for stability in Southeast Asia. An escalation could lead to increased militarization in the region, prompting neighboring countries to enhance their military readiness. This could result in a regional arms race or increased tensions among ASEAN members, undermining long-standing efforts for unity and cooperation. 8. Impact on economic relations. The ongoing conflict will likely have a detrimental impact on economic relations between Cambodia and Thailand. Border closures and military presence may disrupt trade routes, affecting local economies reliant on cross-border commerce. Long-term economic repercussions could lead to significant losses for both nations, prompting eventual discussions on economic cooperation as a means of conflict resolution. 9. Nationalism and domestic politics. Domestic political situations in both countries could be affected by the conflict. Nationalist sentiments may rise, with political leaders leveraging the situation to bolster support. However, prolonged conflict may also lead to public discontent regarding military actions, potentially resulting in political shifts or calls for peace from the populace. 10. Cultural and historical reconciliation efforts. In the aftermath of the conflict, there may be a need for cultural and historical reconciliation efforts. The significance of shared heritage, such as the ancient temples, could serve as a basis for fostering dialogue and understanding between the two nations. Initiatives aimed at promoting cultural unity may emerge as both sides seek to move beyond conflict. Conclusion. The future of the Cambodia-Thailand border conflict remains uncertain, with multiple factors influencing its trajectory. While immediate military engagement seems likely, the potential for international mediation, humanitarian crises, and long-term negotiations presents various pathways for resolution. The situation requires careful monitoring as developments unfold, with the hope for a peaceful resolution that prioritizes the well-being of affected populations and regional stability.